Hi, it's Marnie, and welcome. We are here with Mary Ditmars today, and we're going to be talking about dancing in the Minefields, which is the name of Mary's book. And this lady has a huge heart, and you have been through so much, Mary. I tell you what, when you guys get to know Mary's story, you're just going to have so
Maribeth.
much. Mary Beth, thank you. Her story, you're gonna really respect. What she's going to share with us today, some of the aha moments that God has just brought to her heart over the years. But key to her story is her battle with the alcoholism, as well as the loss of two children, one by cancer, the other by accidental death. And it's like everybody's worst nightmare, right? Mary
Twice.
Beth is losing a child, let alone two children, and yet here you are today praising God, and you're just a hoot. And you're so full of joy and so full of energy, serving people who are really hurting,
Mhm.
and just really delighted to have you with us today.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And I am a miracle. I am a miracle.
You are, and it's really fun. I'm excited to just kind of pick your brain a little bit. So the first one you wanted to share with us today is that laughter and tears are only a moment apart, but joy is eternal.
That is my tagline. That
Mm.
sums up my whole philosophy of life.
Mm.
Uh, my the first son we lost was our Christopher, who was 14. He died of leukemia, but we saw an amazing transformation. It's like Second Corinthians 4:16, where it says our outer self is wasting away, but our inner self is being renewed day by day.
Mm.
He was diagnosed at the age of 10, and by the time he passed at 14, he witnessed to us. He said, Mom, Dad, don't worry. I'm going to be fine. Jesus is coming.
Mm.
So he taught me that, and he
Wow.
actually renewed my walk with the Lord.
Ah, wow. That is just something. And it's so true that when we focus on the pain, it feels eternal.
Yes. Yeah. It feels like you're never going to get out. But Chris was so funny. He was very bloated because of the medicine and the steroids he was
Mm.
on. And he was like, Ma, when I get to heaven, I'm going to get my 6-pack back. I mean, he was talking about his glorified body and
He's
all
looking
that.
ahead. Yeah,
He was thinking
right,
ahead. Hmm.
right. And that's what it said Jesus did on the cross, right? He hated the cross. And yet for the joy set before him, he endured the cross for our sake. Yeah, beautiful.
That's
Beautiful.
right.
Another thing you like to say is when we allow God to use us, our suffering becomes sacred.
That's so true. This is true not only in my walk as a grieving mother, but it's especially true in my walk as a woman in addiction, because I have 16 years of recovery from alcoholism. And I used alcohol as a coping mechanism during
Sure.
Chris's 4 years of treatment. And I really didn't think I had a problem until I decided to cut down, and I couldn't. So now I mentor
Uh,
other women in recovery. I've met women in recovery who have lost children. I have spoken at different events, regarding recovery, and it's been such a blessing. My suffering has become a tool, as I like to say, my mess has become my message.
right. And your testimony,
Mm-hmm,
right. And what's beautiful is that you're actually willing to be vulnerable and share it,
mm-hmm,
and not just tell your story and how God got you out, but also you have tools, because you've really researched this as well, and you've really got tools that can help others to um, get out from under whatever grief or addiction they are
mm-hmm,
they are in.
mm-hmm.
So that's so cool. Another thing you like to say is for us to understand the Lord's ways would be like teaching a dog algebra. What do
Yes,
you mean?
I have this adorable lab mix who's really smart for a dog. We have to spell WALK sometimes in front of her, or biscuit or whatever. But if I got out a math book and I said, "Oh, come here, girl, we're going to do quadratic equations now," she'd be like, And I think that's what God meant when he said, my ways are not your ways. My ways are higher than your ways. We just don't get down here, and we're not going to see the whole picture until we're with the Lord and with Jesus in heaven. We're not going to understand it. We have to accept.
I always say that if God was small enough for me to understand, he wouldn't be a very big God.
Yes, I've heard that. I like that.
Yeah. And, we want to understand him, and he longs to be understood by us. And yet at the same time, I do think that there's this huge, huge chasm between what we can comprehend of him and his fullness.
Yeah, he says we must become like children, you know?
Yeah. And he sent Jesus. I mean, that was the huge part of sending Jesus, was to show us a little bit of what he's like. It's like, if he were a human, he'd act like this.
What would Jesus do?
What would Jesus do? What did Jesus do?
Yeah. And my other son that we lost, Jared, he was 21. We lost him suddenly in a car accident. So, when I do my talks and workshops, I sometimes speak about the difference between prolonged suffering and sudden loss, because there is a difference. Right. Sometimes you have loss that you can't prepare for, but I saw a transformation in Jared too. And one of the last things he did before he passed away is he had caught a lot of fish because he loved fishing. He went down to a homeless camp and had a cookout for them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sharing the fish, which is an analogy of
very biblical, right?
That's so awesome. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of your joy comes from knowing that they're okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're doing better than we are right now.
Yeah, that's right. There's so much hope in Jesus. So much hope in Jesus. We don't remember days and weeks. We remember moments.
Yes. I have a treasure trove of memories. I have a daughter who's doing well, and I have grandchildren, and I'm very blessed to share my life with them. And I'm very blessed that I had a very close relationship with both the boys that we've lost. And, I don't remember what we were doing on June 12th, 1986, but I remember the expression on my son's face when he opened his favorite Christmas present, or when he saw a parrot for the first time. We remember the moments.
Right. And we remember the overall life too. There came a time in the city where we lived before we moved here. There were 8 young people who died in a short period of time, and none of them alcohol or drug related. None of them were suicide. They were all just random, just horrible accidents and aneurysms and, cancer. It was just so many back to back. And most of them were in high school. So it was just devastating to our small community of 1,800 people. And we started to think a lot about heaven and about saying goodbye. And my children adopted the habit of every time before they left me, they would say, "I love you, Mom," because one of the dads had said how it was so important to him that the last thing his son had said to him was, "I love you, Dad." And so they heard that, and they just started that. But one of the things that we also understood was that some of the parents didn't get that. Some of the parents lost their kids without that final word, without that final embrace or whatever. And it was so fascinating to watch how even in their stories, God had provided them with some encouragement, either in the last weeks or months or days of the child's life.
Yeah, and I'm very blessed that is the last thing both of my boys said to me. Even my son, who we lost suddenly, because I was getting ready to go on a trip, and we hugged each other and said, "I love you." But you know what I tell parents who lost children, and maybe in less comforting circumstances? Yes. I tell them, your child has the same God that my child has, and even though your son didn't get to say, "I love you," he went to the same place, and he has the same loving Father.
Yeah. Yeah, and all the things that you've said and done through the years all matter. It's not just the last few words you say to each other. It all
Yeah,
counts. It all counts. When we allow our grief to be pushed aside, then anger replaces it.
that's right. Yes, and then it's so true. There's people have to be given permission to grieve. Your grief has to have a voice. That was one of my reasons for writing books and blogging, is to give other suffering parents permission to give their grief a voice.
I think in America, and I work with especially moms on this one, because we tend to not grieve anything. We don't want to allow ourselves to grieve anything. So, for example, a new baby comes into the family. Well, that is so exciting that you feel a little guilty grieving that you've just lost your sleep. You've lost the private time you used to have with your husband. You've lost all of your autonomy for a long time. I mean, you've really lost quite a lot when that new baby
You've
comes
lost
into
the ability to have adult conversations.
You have right now. You babble, and so when we fail to take a moment to grieve those losses, we really do set ourselves up to be very angry.
Yes.
And it's kind of like pretending that we didn't lose anything, to be joyful or whatever it is, and it's not healthy, and it's not what God calls us to.
And we had to do a lot of grieving because when Chris was on treatment, because we had a child with cancer for 4 years, and he had to grieve the loss of being able to go outside and play. He had to grieve the loss of going to school and seeing his friends. So, there's a lot of people out there whose loved one hasn't necessarily died, but they're still grieving other losses.
Mm-hmm. We sure see that with dementia patients. I watched it first with my father-in-law, and I decided at that point, wow, mom's really grieving, but she can't really show it because he's still here. And so we find ourselves in these situations, but it talks in the Bible about godly grief and how important it is for us to grieve, but not like the world grieves, not without hope. And
Yes.
So, there comes in this joy and this hopefulness as we grieve.
One of my favorite passages is Romans 5:1, where it talks about suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance produces character, and character produces hope.
Yeah.
One of my favorite.
And without hope, the heart fails, right? That's what the Bible says.
I don't know how people without faith get up in this 2020 right now and function, really.
Yeah. Right. It is so much easier. It is so much easier for us who have faith in Jesus Christ to get up and function because there's so much hope. No matter what happens, no matter what civil unrest, no matter what the elections do, no matter what the economy does, we have so much hope in Jesus Christ himself. That is where our hope resides.
Right.
Yeah. So good. Sometimes my life felt like I was stepping on Legos and I couldn't find the light switch. Oh, we can all relate to that pain.
You get up in the morning, and it's dark and the kids have left the Legos. That's how my life felt at times. And, many years ago when Chris first got sick, I relieved myself with alcohol, and it was when I surrendered to the fact that I needed help, I looked upward finally. And by the time we lost Jared actually had better parents than Chris had, because Jared was our youngest. So Jared had a sober, very church connected mom, whereas but I learned that I didn't have to deal with the pain, with worshiping a false idol.
Yeah.
But, it still hurts though.
Oh my goodness.
It still hurts.
So
we don't get saved and then sing Kumbaya.
Every problem doesn't just magically disappear.
No.
Right. But we have someone who understands. And I think, that's one of the things that became clear to me. I remember one time being in the hospital. I'd been taken into the hospital by ambulance, and that night I missed my son's choir concert. And it was devastating to me. I wanted to be there,
Yeah.
And I thought, nobody else in the whole world is feeling this exact sadness right now that I'm feeling.
That's right. That's right.
It's very lonely, except that we have Jesus. Yeah.
It's very lonely, and nobody knows what it feels like to lose your particular child or your particular spouse. It's a unique type of experience, and men and women grieve differently too.
Oh, absolutely. And every situation is so different. You can't ever really say, I know what you're going through, but you can say, I can only imagine what you might be feeling.
I love that song too.
I know, I do too. And it brings it to mind when I say that. But I would never, even if I've gone through something almost exactly the same as someone else, I would never say, I know exactly how you feel, because we don't know how the other person feels. We haven't had their background. We haven't had their life experiences. We didn't have their relationship with that person. We won't have their loss. It's so unique. Yeah. So to extend love and compassion and point them toward Jesus is the best thing. The last one here is, one of the best things we can do as a parent is to sit down and have dinner with our children.
Yes, we continued that even when Chris was sick, because children need to be heard. And that other quote that we talked about earlier about remembering the moments, a lot of moments are created around the dinner table. And by the time our children were teenagers, phones had come into the picture.
Yes.
So the phones had to go away at the dinner table. Some of my friends actually had a basket where they had to park their phones. It was their phone parking lot for dinner time.
Love it.
But it's a practice that's just not continued enough. And I believe Satan's really attacking the family unit in this country. And I'm just so glad I had all those years of sitting down with the kids, especially the boys. We tell jokes. We would process what was going on at school. Mom, there's a bully. How should I handle it? We listened, we processed. Families are just in such a hurry now, and everybody's got their face in a screen. It's a lost art.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so valuable. When you're talking about moments, our youngest son, Timothy, I've always called Tim the life of my party, because he was wild since he was inside of me. and
Get away in there.
Everybody that knows Tim has Timmy stories from when he was little.
Oh,
but he was the youngest of three, and so the other two left first, and then we had Tim. But then sometimes we would all be home together, and then sometimes we would be home together, but then Tim wasn't there. And we realized that these dinners without Tim, finally we realized that the problem was that Tim wasn't there. So we had always had hilarious, fun dinners together because Tim was the life of the party. And then whenever Tim wasn't there, we would just have these normal dinners, and we'd have normal conversations, and they would just be kind of, just normal and average. But the memories, when you said creating memories, it's so true that just spending time together is the key. You can never get back what you didn't do. And so making that a priority along the way.
Yes. Even with both parents working, we made it a priority.
Yeah. And aren't you glad you did? Yeah.
I am glad, because I have, more memories than a parent who was more rushed would have.
Right. So do you have a favorite verse that you would like to share with us? Like maybe a life verse, or one that you've gone to many times for comfort?
I love Psalm 91:4. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness will be your shield and your rampart.
I love Psalm 91. A perfect comforting psalm to
well, there's a story behind it too.
Go ahead. Yeah.
My youngest son, my oldest son, Chris, when he was on his deathbed, my husband asked him to let us know he made it to heaven okay. And Chris said, well, Dad, I'm going to be new in heaven. I don't know what Jesus is going to let me do. I know, it was like role reversal.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And Rob said, could you put a feather under my pillow?
Huh.
And 3 days after Chris passed, the Lord in his mercy gave us a miracle. Our bed was covered in feathers, covered. And we had no down comforter. We had a couple of small down pillows, but I mean, they were full. And there are other times in my life when, I've gotten little God winks. And what's
Wow.
funny is when it happened, I had never heard Psalm 91:4. So when I told that story to someone and they showed it to me, I was like,
yes. Oh, I just love it.
Yeah, it was a little miracle God allowed in our lives. It really did happen.
You know, God is always present with us, and it just takes our breath away when He makes Himself visible in ways like that, doesn't it?
Yes. I have more stories.
Yes, I'm sure you do. And you guys will make sure to check out Maribeth's book, as well as invite her to speak at your women's events and for your groups that are going through either addiction recovery or grief recovery. And you can learn more about her at her own website, maribethditmars.com, or she's in Florida and you can learn more about her at womenspeakers.com. Thank you all so much for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.